There we go. We're off mute now. I had muted it in 2 places. Is that better, Pat? Alright, very good, very good. I'm good at this. I'm a bit terrible at this. That's fine. So we're here to talk about draft, because apparently I can't stop talking about it. I really just want to make sure that all of our coaches are prepared to go in, that nobody is caught off guard and going, oh, well, I didn't really think that this was this way, and has a bad time. So I have a little bit of extra time. I wanted to provide as much information as I possibly could before our draft went live, and so here we are. This one's going to be a bit less prepared than a lot of the ones that we've done before, because I've basically got a sticky note that I wrote down at work with some ideas of some stuff to talk about. And so we're going to talk about some stuff, and I'm going to try to be as in-depth as possible, because I think that there is some value in that. Not for people like Riley there, who's just being shit like he always is, but for those of you that might be less familiar with Showdown but still want to participate in our draft. So, let's start off with just talking about draft in general and give a real brief overview. I do have some more in-depth stuff on this if you want to go and check out those videos. I'm also going to be writing up something so that those of you can't really just like sit down and watch at this point, I guess about 2 hours of video, can read it through it at your leisure. So, what is Draft? Draft is a format of competitive Pokemon in which you and an opponent both have a limited number of Pokemon to pick from to build a team. You can use anything that's legal for your Pokemon within the rules of your draft to make your team of 6, but you only have certain Pokemon to pick from, and it's usually exclusive. So, if I take Azumarill, you don't get to take Azumarill. That, in its core, is Draft. The idea behind it is, as Jolly once put in one of his videos, which I also recommend you watch if you get the chance, because they're very good, it is making all Pokemon viable on the same stage by limiting your access to the most powerful ones, as opposed to Smogon tiers, which make Pokemon viable by restricting them into certain metagames. We have pretty much everything available, but you can only get so much of the really powerful stuff, which makes the less powerful stuff more valuable. In our format, you're going to take 11 Pokemon, which includes 1 Mega Pokemon, and it's divided up into different tiers. So you're going to get 1 each from each of these tiers, an additional 1 from the C tier, 1 Mega Pokemon from any tier, and then 4 picks that you have to spend points on. You have 400 points to use, and as you can see, A tier costs 180, E tier only costs 40. So you can get more lower picks, or spend a lot of points on the top ones. You do have to draft all 11 Pokemon. You do have to be able to spend the points to pick up a Pokemon at the time that you do, which really only comes up because in our Mega Pokemon, drafting a Mega A subtracts 40 points from that 400, Mega B has no effect, and a Mega C will actually grant you an additional 40. So you can get more of these higher tier ones if you take a lower tier Mega. Our draft league is largely based on another draft league, World Battle Entertainment, that's very large on YouTube. I do recommend checking it out if you get the chance and you can deal with YouTubers screaming at the beginning of their videos. But that is, in its basic form, what our draft is. We're going to be doing a snake draft, so it's going to start with 1 person, and our draft order is already set. But it's going to start with pick 1, go all the way up to pick 16 in each of our 2 drafts, and then start from 16 and go backwards 15, 14, 13 till we get back to 1. And we just go back and forth until we get to the end of the draft. This gives everybody some equal chance. It's not possible to give everyone equal no matter what kind of method that we do, but it does make it so that even if you are at the end, you're not super punished for that, because you then get to pick again immediately in the second round. A little bit of a balancing thing. A lot of this is just taken from other drafts. Pokemon Draft is not what came up with this idea. But that is Draft League in itself. Now, I know that the points stuff really confuses people. It is consistently the thing that we have the most trouble with in the draft, is explaining as we're going along, like, okay, well, you've made these picks, so you can only make these, like, you can only pick from these tiers now. You can't get the top tier stuff anymore. In every draft we've run, it's been an issue, so I really want to talk about that a bit more in depth. And I do recommend, if you've got Google Drive, which I recommend because all of our documents are on Google Drive, so having access to them is kind of useful. But if you are on Google Drive, if you've got access to that, or if you set up access to it, you can take this doc, well, not this doc, but the docs that we have posted, and you should be able to go to File and make a copy. That will give you a copy of this document that nobody else has access to, and then you can play around with it and figure out what to draft. And we're actually going to draft a board here, and then I'm going to talk about it as we go along as to how the points work out and why I'm drafting certain things and all of that. Full disclosure, I'm literally drafting the team that I drafted in the first season, because I like it. and I think that it was well enough balanced, and it will show a team that we can draft in our format. So let's go ahead and get into that. The only difference to note is that in our last league, we did draft our our Z Crystal, and in this one, it's totally open. So we don't have to do that, but I'll explain what I was doing to kind of lean into that. So to start off with our draft, well, yeah, we'll talk about things as we go. To start off with our draft, my first pick in that draft was my Mega Pokemon, Mega Altaria. Mega Altaria is in our A tier, and you'll see that it actually subtracts that 40 points due to some formula magic that I've put into there, because Mega Altaria is a powerful Mega Pokemon. I also want to mention here that there's resources available to you that you might want to look into for planning your draft and for making your teams as you go along. What I recommend looking at is Smogon. Smogon is a competitive Pokemon resource that, boost that a little bit, that talks about Pokemon in the metagames that they're relevant in and gives you a lot of information to kind of figure out what that Pokemon is good at. Yeah, that song did get much louder. Hopefully that is a little bit better. We'll see. And we can boost up this microphone a little bit. That will probably help. Don't want to go too hard on it. So I'll mention again, Smogon.com is a resource for competitive Pokemon. It will give you information as to what your Pokemon can do. Now, it's geared towards the Smogon tiers, so you'll see that, like Altaria, who I clicked on, it has write-ups for UU and PU because those are the formats that Altaria is used in. And actually, yeah, so it gives you a nice little indication here as to Altaria's stats, both before it Mega Evolves and after. And the important thing to note with Mega Altaria is that when it Mega Evolves, its types actually change. Base Altaria is a Dragon and Flying Pokemon, but Mega Evolved Altaria is a Dragon and Fairy. It's also worth noting that in our format, you do have to Mega Evolve your Pokemon on the first turn, which wasn't necessarily true in our last league, but I drafted Mega Altaria specifically because of that Dragon Fairy typing. There is a concept in competitive Pokemon called cores for team building that is kind of just a rule of thumb. It's a heuristic to help you look at a team to make sure that you're covering different weaknesses. The most recognizable core is the Fire, Water, Grass core, the types of every starter trio. And it's balanced because Fire is super effective against grass, but not very effective against water, and so on and so forth. And more so that those resistances work the same way. Water resists fire, fire resists grass, and grass resists water. By making sure that you've drafted a Pokemon that has a fire type, that you have a water type, that you have a grass type, you're covering those defensive cores there. There's also what is commonly referred to as the Fantasy Core, because it is composed of the Dragon type, the Fairy type, and the Steel type. Now, admittedly, drafting a Dragon Fairy doesn't really give you a nice balanced core, but I thought that it was a really interesting way to really dig into that Fantasy Core right away, and I also really liked the things that it offered. It has equal attacking stats once it Mega Evolves. It has 110 attack and special attack, which means that it can be run physically or specially. If your opponent has a really good physical, bulky Pokemon, I could run it specially and get access to different moves and be able to fight that Pokemon better. Or, since Mega Altaria is a dragon and has access to Dragon Dance, which you'll see right here on one of its recommended movesets, it can set up physically and then hit really hard with Return, specifically because of its ability, Pixelate. Pixelate is an ability that gains as soon as it Mega Evolves, overriding whatever ability it had before, that makes normal type moves into fairy type moves and multiplies their power. Which means that if Mega Altaria clicks Return, which if we open up we'll see is a move that at maximum happiness has a base power of 102, I want to say. It doesn't actually tell me here. Well, thanks, Smogon. Real helpful. But it has a base power, I believe, of 102, which is then boosted by 1.2 by Pixelate, and then gets the same type attack bonus, commonly referred to as Stab, from being Fairy type to match with Mega Altaria's Fairy type. Which means basically that it's a really powerful move. The same thing is true on the special side with Hyper Voice. If you scroll down on the Smogon page, it'll actually give you a list of all of the moves that Pokemon can learn. They're not organized in any way and you can't sort them, so you might go to a site like Bulbapedia or Cerebi.net in order to get some tables that you could sort, or whatever you want to do. There isn't a right way to do this. Whatever way works for you and gives you the information that you need in a way that you need it is totally fine. Mega Altaria also seemed interesting to me because, like I said, we didn't need to immediately Mega Evolve our Pokemon, and it gets an ability called Cloud 9 that I was interested in. Which means, if your Pokemon has Cloud 9, when it switches in, it turns off any effects of weather. I wasn't particularly interested in going into weather as a strategy, and we'll talk about some of those later, but I did want to have an answer to it if somebody was into that. Mega Altaria having Cloud 9 gives me a way to answer weather. So we started off, this one. We started off our draft with Mega Altaria. We were 6th pick in our initial draft. We had 14 participants, so it took a little while to get back to us, but we were very happy when we did. And our second pick was still available, and we wanted to take from the A tier Excadrill. And we'll just swap on over to Excadrill's page on Smogon. Excadrill is a ground and steel type Pokemon. Also, if you hover over types on Smogon, it'll tell you all of the ways that other types interact with them. Excadrill, being a steel type, has a lot of other types listed because steel resists practically everything in the game, which makes it a very good defensive type. But we wanted to take Excadrill to complete our fantasy core with only 2 Pokemon, which again doesn't necessarily work, but we did have Fairy Dragon and Steel represented, and also pick up a very strong physical attacker. I also was very interested in Excadrill for its ability, Mold Breaker. Mold Breaker is an ability that isn't super clear from its explanation here. This Pokemon's moves and their effects ignore the abilities of other Pokemon. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is that if a Pokemon has an ability that would prevent it from taking damage from an attack, such as Levitate, making you immune to flying type moves, or Sap Sipper, making you absorb grass type moves, Mold Breaker gets past that. I was specifically interested in Mold Breaker because I noticed that in our last league, Mimikyu was A tier, and I kind of figured that somebody was going to take it. I wasn't necessarily interested in using it myself with this team, but I wanted to have a good way to answer that. And Excadrill's Mold Breaker lets you ignore Mimikyu's disguise. You just hit immediately. You don't have to wait that extra turn. So we took Excadrill, getting our Steel type to finish our Fairy Dragon Steel core. And you would think here that we would have been smart enough to draft into Sand a little bit, but we actually didn't do that until later in the season. I'm going to draft what our team ended up as because it's much better. In our B tier, we decided to take a favorite of mine, and we took Kommo-o. Kommo-o is a dragon fighting, so I did finish my Fairy Dragon Steel. And it also can run physically or specially. It's a little bit stronger on the physical side, but its special attack is still very good. And it gets some very interesting abilities as well. Both bulletproof and soundproof protect it from different types of moves. specifically bulletproof, protecting it from moves that are like bullets. Focus Blast being the one that comes to mind immediately. And this one actually does tell you Bullet Seed, Octazooka, sure. Focus Blast, Aura Sphere, anything with ball or bomb, so Shadow Ball, Seed Bomb, that kind of stuff. And Soundproof, protecting it from moves that are based in sound, namely Hyper Voice. This only tells you that, hey, by the way, it also blocks Heal Bell, but Hyper Voice is one of the main ones that was in my mind because Mega Gardevoir also gets Pixelate. Sylveon gets Pixelate as well, that we talked about with Altaria. And those mean that Hyper Voice becomes Fairy type, which, if you look at Komo's Dragon Fighting type, you'll see that it is very weak to Fairy. That means it takes 4 times damage from it. Basically, if you hit Como with a Fairy move, it dies. It dies a terrible death. And we would like to avoid that. So having the ability to go Soundproof and block that against opponents that had that option was very desirable. I don't remember what Overcoat does. I don't think we ever ran it. It's immune to powder moves and damage from Sandstorm or Hail. So while we didn't end up doing that in any of our matches, that does still have use, especially on teams that are trying to set up on you with Sleep Powder, for instance. It would block that. If you're like me, you're going to end up with about 500,000 Smogon tabs open. Try to maintain your tabs. Alright, so we took Como because we really liked it. We used it in our gym league that we had on the Blastburn radio server. It also gets access to some really neat stuff. Stealth Rocks is an option for it, which is a little bit weird, but we'll use that as an opportunity to talk about Stealth Rocks. Stealth Rock is a really useful move. It sets up a hazard on the other side of the field. Since we are playing 6v6 singles, switching Pokemon in and out as the match goes on becomes important because you don't want to just be stuck in with something. Your opponent switches in an answer to it, and then you go, well, guess I die. You'd like to be able to switch out. Having a hazard up like Stealth Rocks will deal damage every time a Pokemon switches in. Stealth Rocks are really good because their damage does scale with resistances and weaknesses, and more things are weak to rock than you might realize. Also, most of the things that can clear rocks easily using the move Defog are weak to rock. So having Stealth Rocks is really nice. It lets you kind of wear your opponent down, which can be really valuable over what can be a very long match. In addition to Stealth Rock, Como gets just some nice stuff. Poison Jab, Close Combat, Clanging Scales, which is basically, it's a special 110 base power, perfectly accurate dragon move. It lowers your defense by 1 stage. Now, worth noting as well that this set on Smogon here has you running the Comomium Z, which is a Z crystal specific to Como that changes its Clanging Scales into a move called Clangorous Soul Blaze that deals a bunch of damage and also boosts all of Como's stats by 1. That move is banned in our league, and so is every other move that boosts all of your stats every time you use it. Stuff like Omnis Wind, their ancient power that has a chance to boost your stats, that's totally fine, but the ones that guaranteed do it, like Clangorous Soul Blaze, are not allowed, unfortunately. But we still liked Como for its range of coverage and its interesting abilities and basically just its stats. It's got good stats. Look at all these numbers. You might notice that my team is running a little bit slow, and I'd love to tell you that we corrected that further down the draft, but we definitely didn't. I drafted a really slow team, and it was a struggle. But we drafted Como there. Moving down into the C tier, I don't necessarily remember the exact order that I drafted it, but I know that we drafted Silvally. Let's talk about the value of versatility. In draft, you know the 11 Pokemon that are on your opponent's roster, and your goal is to make a team that can answer that opponent's team. The more ways that you can run any Pokemon on your roster, the less likely your opponent is to guess what you're running and be able to counter it. Silvally is really interesting in our format because it has the ability RKS system, which it's specific to Silvally, but several things have abilities like this. If this Pokemon is Silvally, its type changes to match its held memory. There's a group of items that Silvally can hold that will change its type. By default, it's normal type, but if it's holding the ice memory, it becomes ice type, giving it, the resistances and weaknesses of that type, and also giving it the same type attack bonus of that type for those moves. Also, all of its stats are base 95. You'll see some legendaries on our list that are all base 100, which is, admittedly, better than base 95. But this was pretty close, and I liked its flexibility. And there's another thing that Silvally could do that I'll talk about, I guess now, because I'm not going to draft a Z Crystal at any point here. Silvally gets access to an interesting move called Parting Shot, which you'll see when I pull it up. Not a lot of things actually get access to. I know the list seems kind of big, but it's actually mostly Silvally. Parting Shot lowers the target's attack and special attack by 1 stage and switches out the Pokemon that's in play. Which means, if you think that Silvally is going to take a bunch of damage, but it's faster than the Pokemon that it's facing, you can lower that target's attacking stats and switch out. Or, if you run Silvally slow, you can have it take a hit, lower the target's attacks, and switch something in that ideally will then probably set up. It's also worth noting that Parting Shot is Dark type. And we ended up drafting our Darkinium Z once we got there, because status moves work differently than damaging moves when you do Z. If you use a Z move on a damaging move, it will boost its power and remove any secondary effects that move has. If you take Hyper Beam, something that has the great downside of making it recharge afterwards, and turn it into a Z move, it just ends up being like 180 power and you don't need to recharge. Status moves work differently. They all have different effects, so I recommend looking them up to try to kind of figure that out. Bulbapedia has a page that lists them all in a table that you can sort that I really like. But you'll see here that the Z power effect of Parting Shot, it fully restores the HP of the Pokemon chosen to replace the user. What this meant for me is I could take something like Mega Altaria or Como and use it to punch holes in a team, then later on bring in Silvally, use its coverage to break some stuff down, and then when it looked like Silvally was on its way out, use Z Parting Shot holding that Darkinium Z, fully restore one of my more powerful Pokemon, and break through the rest of the team. We also ended up with a couple other options in our lower tiers to use a move called Memento, which does something kind of similar, though a bit more extreme. It lowers the target's attack and special attack by 2 stages, but then the user faints. This does mean that you get to switch something in, but you lose the Pokemon that used Memento. We did end up doing that a couple of times. It was still totally worth it because Z Memento fully restores the HP of the Pokemon that comes into play. Again, you get something, you bring it in, you make sure it's healthy, and whatever it's facing now has much lowered stats and can't deal with you as effectively. Speaking of Memento, our next C tier was our mascot of the Windy City, Whimsicott. Whimsicott. I really like Whimsicott, and it seemed like a fun option. It's got an actually really good ability. You might notice that a lot, where I'm like, oh, look at this cool ability that this thing has, because that's a lot of what makes certain Pokemon good. You'll look at Whimsicott's stats here and notice that, like, hey, these aren't great. Like, they're all red and orange except for speed, which is, like, pretty high up there. And, yeah, it was very good for its ability to be fast. I did have to run Choice Scarf on it a couple times, which made me a little salty. But Whimsicott gets access to Prankster, which is a really neat ability. And if you don't know a lot about Pokemon, you're going to read this and it's not going to make any sense. This Pokemon's status moves have priority raised by 1, but dark types are immune. Okay, so let's scroll down to the moves here. You're going to see that there's these different symbols here, and they mean different things. Absorb has this little blue circle-y thing. That means it is a special attack. Its power is going to be based on your special attack stat and your opponent's special defense stat. Also, you'll see this red kind of explosion, whatever. This red and yellow thing, that's a physical move. Its power is going to be based on your attack and your opponent's defense. All of these weird white circly things are status moves. They don't cause any damage by default, but they all have different effects. And these are all the secondary effects of stuff, but these tell you exactly what each of these things does. And if we go down to Memento here, which Whimsicott gets, you'll see that it feints the user and lowers the target's attack and special attack by 2 stages. And it is a status move. What having Prankster means is that if I choose a status move, I go first. Unless you've also chosen something with priority, which means that it goes faster. The most common example of this from the games being Quick Attack. If you click Quick Attack, you go first, unless your opponent also clicked Quick Attack and is faster than you. With Whimsicott having Prankster, any of these status moves go first, like Quick Attack, which is really useful for a few of them. Defog, especially, being able to come in and know that I get my defog off before I die, which, given Whimsicott's defensive stats, happened more than ideally. But knowing that I could get that defog off was really valuable. Again, Z Memento was really nice. It worked out fantastically, actually, because you click Memento, priority makes it go first, I lower your attack and defense, I die, your attack does nothing because I'm dead, and then I switch something in and it gets fully healed. Really nice for what we wanted to do with our team. In our D tier, who did we draft in D tier? We ended up, are you no longer D tier? But let's find out. Yeah, that used to be D tier. Whoops. Where'd we put you now, Giggleth? Oh, you're C tier now. Oh no, my team's illegal. Okay. Well. So, we have moved some things around in tiers over the course of between Season 1 and Season 2. And some things have gone up and some things have gone down. I mentioned that Mimikyu was Tier A in our last draft, and here it is in Tier B. Giggleth was in our D tier during our last draft, but now it's up here in Tier C. Which means that the team that I drafted last time isn't legal in its exact form that I was looking at. So now I need to come up with something else. Okay. We'll get to that. Let's skip over that. We'll come back to that. The E-tier Pokemon that we took is Dusknoir. I'm not going to keep pulling them up just because it's going to take forever if I do. Dusknoir is a ghost type, which is nice for blocking the move Rapid Spin, which clears hazards from only your opponent's side of the field. It's, along with Defog, one of your options for clearing hazards. And it also has access to Memento. It's a bulky Pokemon, and has Will-O-Wisp and Toxic and some neat stuff that we ended up running during the season. So, pretending that we drafted a D tier, which we didn't because I don't remember what all of it is, which is fine. This would be our draft so far, right? We now have to deal with our picks points. Now, we have 360 points available. Because we drafted an A-tier Mega, it took 40 points away, and we can look at our tier list and see exactly how much each tier costs. 180, 120, 100, 60, 40. So, worth noting, your Mega Pokemon have points next to them because they affect your points totals. You can't draft additional Mega Pokemon. Sorry. You can only have one Mega Pokemon. Also, something I didn't mention is that when you draft a Mega Pokemon, the base form of that Pokemon goes away. Nobody can draft Altaria because I've drafted Mega Altaria. if you draft the base form of a Pokemon, say I wanted to take Scizor, great example. Say I want to take Scizor and I draft him at the A tier, Mega Scizor over here is now not available. In our draft, since we are running 2 conferences, 2 drafts, you're only going to need to worry about what the people in your conference take as far as what it's going to block for you. 2 different people can draft Mega Altaria in Sun Conference and Moon Conference, 1 each, totally fine. So we're back here, we have 360 points. We could, so we'll play around with it. We could say draft another A tier, Azumarill being just the first one there. It takes off 180 points, we have 180 points left. And if you're not thinking about it, you might go, oh, well, cool, I could draft another A tier, and we'll draft Bucephalon, because that's 180 points. But then you still have these 2 slots that you have to fill with Pokemon, but you can't because you don't have any points. You need to make sure that you'll be able to finish your draft whenever you're making a points pick. So we can't take 2 more A tiers because we won't have points to finish our draft. We could, if we wanted to draft... Are you A tier? You ought to fill in. No, you're C tier. You could draft a bunch of low tier Pokemon to try to get that top tier, and you'll see that that does work. We could actually upgrade these all to Ds, A, D, 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 and run out of our points. And we'll go ahead and just make them all Alolan Executor to show that, yes, Alolan Executor is in the D tier, and if you draft it, it will use all your points. So, So we could draft another A tier, but then we would be stuck drafting 3 more D tiers, which we don't even know the 1 D tier we want because our team composition changed. So I don't think that's exactly what we want to do. What we want to do here for our team is draft stuff in the middle, just so that we get some power without going too all in on a small number of picks. Because we're going to be facing a bunch of different people with a bunch of different rosters, we want to have power throughout, so that we can make sure that we have something reasonable to answer their Pokemon with. We're going to go ahead and... Sorry, excuse me for 1 moment while I let my dog out. There you go. Alright. Okay. So, like I was saying with our draft, we're going to go for something a bit more in the middle of stuff. We are going to draft Greninja. And we have it right here, actually, that Greninja in our league has to run Torrent. Now, this is worth noting, just because Greninja has access to a bunch of really good abilities, but we can only use its less good ability. So it has Protean, which changes its type whenever it uses a move. It has Battle Bond, which when it gets a KO turns it into this monstrosity. For us, you have to use Torrent. When a Pokemon has 1/3 or less of its maximum HP, its attack stat is multiplied by 1.5 while using a water attack. So that is what Greninja is stuck with in our league, but this does not make him a terrible Pokemon. It just makes him not overpowered. For us, he's in the B tier in this draft, and he gets a lot of good coverage. He has access to some interesting hazards and such like that. I do think that Greninja is a good Pokemon. It's also very fast. And also, it's Dark type, which works with our Darkinium Z that we drafted in our last week. In our next slot, we are going to take here Gigalith, which we know is up to C tier in this season. Gigalith is really important for our team, mainly because of our A tier Excadrill there. Excadrill, in addition to Mold Breaker, has 2 abilities that interact with sand. So it has Sand Force and Sand Rush. Sand Force makes its attacks hit for more under sand, but Sand Rush is really important. When Sandstorm is active, this Pokemon's speed is doubled. Excadrill has a base 88 speed, which is not amazing, it's not the worst, but it is outsped by a lot of things that can threaten it very effectively. When you double that 88 to, 176? There's not a lot that can outspeed that at all. So we wanted to get something that could set sand by ability, because it's better to not have to spend a turn setting sand. And Gigalith's Sand Force ability sets sand when it comes into not Sand Force, Sand Stream sets sand when it comes into play. Weather is an interesting strategy because it helps certain types, it hurts certain other types, and there's different abilities that interact with each one. It can be really powerful, though it can be somewhat predictable. We decided that we wanted to go into sand a little bit. We got Gigalith to work with our Excadrill, but we didn't want to go too hard into it to be predictable. So we got Gigalith to be able to set sand to make our Excadrill go very fast so that it could more effectively sweep through teams. So we have now 140 points left because we've drafted a B and a C tier, which means that from our last picks we can get at maximum from the C tier. Because we'll need 40 points at minimum to finish our draft, we can only go up to 100 for our third pick, and that will, get us down to 40. So that's from the C tier. And I know I can't get all the stuff that I had before. So we're going to go ahead and take what used to actually be in B tier, but is now in C. And Rotom Heat. We're going to take Rotom Heat. Rotom Heat is really nice because it's an electric type. It gets Volt Switch, it gets Defog, it gets Will-O-Wisp, it gets all sorts of cool stuff. All of the Rotom forms are pretty good, and Rotom Heat really worked for our team due to the tier that it was in and kind of just the utility that it offered. So we now have 40 points left. We have to draft a D tier, which we skipped over because my last season's roster doesn't neatly slot into this season, and we have to draft an E tier to finish out our draft. I know what E tier we're going to take. I don't know what D tier we're going to take because what I used to take in D tier is no longer there. Okay, so actually in our D tier, what we're going to draft is Typhlosion. I actually initially drafted this. We ended up trading it away partway through the season. Typhlosion is unfortunately hampered a bit by the evolution of Pokemon. It used to have really good coverage, but then the physical special split came along and took a bunch of that coverage and made it physical instead of special, and you'll see that Typhlosion just doesn't have as good of a special or physical attack as special. It does get Flash Fire, it does get Blaze, and it gets access to the move Eruption, which at full HP has 150 base power. Really good. So you slap some choice specs on it, which boosts your special attack by 1.5 times, but locks you into a move once you first select it, and you click Eruption till it dies. It finishes out that Fire, Water, Grass, and gives us an option to hit things with fire, which is just kind of nice. And for our last pick, our last points pick here, we're going to take Rhydon out of the E tier. Rhydon is really bulky, has some good attack, has weird coverage because it's from Gen 1, and is one of the slowest Pokemon. I forget what exactly its speed is, but it's super duper slow. Rhydon? Spelling helps. Has 40 speed. and its special defense is, well, bad. It's very bad. But it has its uses. Being a not fully evolved Pokemon, it can hold the Eviolite, which will boost both of its defensive stats by 1.5 times. Taking that special defense up to something that's still really not great, but that physical defense way up to 180, which is incredible. So it does have its uses. It's got weird coverage, and it's a good Stealth Rocks user. So this is now the team that we're talking about. These were all on my squad at one point. I did at some point have all of these on my team during the regular season. Like I said, tiers moved around a little bit, so I didn't have all of them, but they were part of our roster through the season last time. Looking back on our team, we do have our fire, water, and grass core in Whimsicott, Typhlosion, and Greninja. All three of those are really not very defensive, but they do cover those attacking types pretty well. We have our Fairy, who's also a dragon here, our Dragon and Steel in our top tier picks there. And we also have a little bit of synergy with our weather here from Gigalith, boosting Excadrill speed and actually boosting Rhydon's special defense, because that's what Sandstorm does for rock types. Even our low tier picks have use. A lot of people kind of focus on the top tiers and go, oh, these are things I really care about, these are things that I, need to draft well, and, the E tiers, well, we may as well not even draft them. Well, they are still really important. We, in our regular season, put a lot of use into Rhydon and Dusknoir especially, because they both had access to things that we really needed. We didn't want to use high tier picks on those things, but Rhydon's ability to eat physical attacks and set Stealth Rocks and be able to click Earthquake and Stone Edge and weird shit like Blizzard and Surf was useful. And Dusknoir being a ghost type to block Rapid Spin, being able to set status, being very bulky itself, and having access to Memento for our Z Memento was very valuable throughout the season. Silphley in C tier, which is kind of your middle of the road, was almost always on our squad because of its flexibility. It may have not been incredible at anything it did, but it has access to so many different moves and any type that you happen to need for a battle that it was almost always on the table. We always discussed what we could do with it because it's just versatile. It can be run in a variety of ways, and that's valuable in draft. And I ported them over into Showdown. I have all of the teams that we ran throughout the season. We talked about points a bit, which I think was good. We talked about some synergies, which, things that are maybe not good enough on their own become better when you put them together. That's synergy. Gigalith and Excadrill being one of those examples. I have a couple other questions that came up here that I'll try to kind of cover as we can, but I do want to talk about Showdown. All of our battles are going to be done on Pokemon Showdown, and Pokemon Showdown is a website. If you just search Pokemon Showdown on Google or what have you, it'll pop up. It's also play.pokemonshowdown.com. You can access it from a computer. You can access it from a phone. The important thing to note is that it saves your teams in your cookies, so you need to, first of all, allow those. And second of all, if you go between your computer and your phone or two different computers, it's not going to know that. You get to make an account, or you have to log in to make a name, essentially. I recommend making an account just because then you know your name's available, and it makes it easier for us to plan battles. Showdown has a lot of stuff going on. For our league, I'm just going to talk about how you're going to do what you need to do. So the two primary things you're going to need to do are to make your team in it and battle with it. Pokemon Showdown's Team Builder you get to by clicking Team Builder, and you'll see that here's all of my teams for the whole season. We did bring Excadrill literally every week. It was very good for us. But if you don't have teams or you're trying to make a new team, you just click this new team button and it will give you a blank one. You can set a format, and what we're going to end up doing all of our battles in, so I do recommend that you just choose this format. We're going to do it in Anything Goes. We're doing that to allow for certain things like baton pass and trapping moves that aren't allowed in the other metagames, and it's just this one basically doesn't have rules. You still have to follow our rules, but Showdown's not going to enforce them for you. And then you can do two things. You can either import from text or add Pokemon. Import from text you're not going to really do until you're moving teams between stuff, but I will talk about how to do that. We're going to add Pokemon. And it'll pull up the list of all the Pokemon. All of them. I recommend using the search function because it will make your life much easier. So we're going to start our teams like we started all of our teams in our last league. We're putting Excadrill in because it's really good. So we type in Excadrill, pulls it up. You see a picture of Excadrill here. It automatically fills in some stuff. All of our battles will be at a level 100. You can set your gender to whichever way you want it for each Pokemon, or even do it random. Sure, you can have shinies. Why not? We're not going to mess with this. That's not necessarily relevant. We're going to go no on shiny, and you can also, up here, you'll see it defaults to Excadrill, but you can nickname your Pokemon. There is there is the theory that nicknaming your Pokemon raises all of their base stats by 5%. You're not required to nickname your Pokemon, but it does make it a bit more fun. I would ask that if you are fighting somebody that you do not nickname all of your Pokemon to be the same as their Pokemon, because it messes with our ability to easily pull information out of your match, and it makes us very sad. Please don't do it. I don't want to force people to register nicknames, so just be good. Down here we also have item, which items are really important for your competitive experience. This stuff at the top is just items that are popular, and I mean they tend to be the ones that you're going to pick, but a full list of the items that you can use are all down here. And if you decide that you want to run Quick Claw Excadrill, go for it. You're absolutely allowed to. The only thing that you need to keep in mind item-wise for restrictions is that your Mega Pokemon has to be holding their Mega Stone and Mega Evolve on the turn that they come into play, or that they stay in play. And your Pokemon that aren't your Mega Pokemon can't Mega Evolve. So if you draft base form Scizor, you can't have it hold the Scizorite, whatever its Mega Stone is called. Otherwise, go for it. If Showdown lets you do it, it's fine. We're going to say we're going to run Excadrill with Life Orb. Life Orb is going to make its attacks do 1.3 times damage, and it'll make us lose 1/10 of our max HP after each attack. Excadrill isn't super bulky, which you can kind of see on its stat preview here, so we're not too worried about that recoil. We just want it to hit really hard and kill everything. Over here, we can start filling in moves. When you click on moves, it will pull up your list here, and it'll show you all of the things that Excadrill usually uses. It'll also tell you things that usually aren't run, but you are absolutely welcome to run them. And it will only show you moves that Excadrill can learn, which is really nice. Generally, we ran our Excadrill with Earthquake, Iron Head, its 2 stab moves, ground type attack, steel type attack, and then some amount of other stuff. Very often we put Rapid Spin on it so that it could clear hazards in a pinch, and we would sometimes put Stealth Rock on it, or Sword Stance is really useful because getting 2 times attack on an already very high attack stat is ideal. When we click over to our stats, you'll see that Showdown gives you a spread that it thinks you're going to want to use, but you're not locked into using. If you click this, it'll automatically set your EVs, IVs, and Nature to match what it's telling you up here. But if you don't, then you don't have to. You can set the Nature as you wish. It'll tell you here what it boosts and what it lowers. The two that Excadrill is generally picking between are Jolly, which boosts its speed at the cost of its special attack, which we're not using anyway, and Adamant, which boosts its attack at the cost of its special attack, which we're not using anyway. We're going to actually run this as a Sand Rush Sweeper, so we're not going to need to boost our speed, I don't think. We're just going to boost our attack. And you'll see that when I select that nature, it'll actually change these stats here at the end. This tells you what your stats are at level 100 with the nature, EV, IVs, and all of that. So you'll see if we change this to Jolly, you'll see that attack stat drop and that speed stat go up. Like I said, in this case, we're going to go Adamant because we want Excadrill to hit as hard as possible. And to facilitate that, we have EVs. Now you see down here that it says remaining 508. That's the number of EVs that you have to spread between your stats, and to max one out is going to cost you 252 of them. You can only fully max 2 stats. You'll have 4 points left over to raise 1 stat by 1 point. But you're not locked into doing that. If I know that I don't need to get 550 speed or whatever that ends up being, yeah, 550 speed in Sand, say I know I only need to get 400, I can lower this speed down. In fact, I don't need to invest anything in speed to be above 400. But if I want to get, say, 450, we'll go ahead and invest 52 points in it to get it to 225. And you'll see I didn't need to like do the math and say, okay, well, if 4 EVs boost it by 1 point, how many would that be? If you just move the slider, the stats will go up and down, and you can do it that way. We have 200 left. Excadrill, we could put it into his defense or special defense. We're actually, and if we want to kind of evenly split between defenses, we could just put it all into HP. You'll see that it'll go up there. I think we're actually going to take our HP up to 399. We're going to not do it as an even number because some things cut in half, and don't want to deal with that. And that 10% thing will work weird there, but I'm just doing it to be weird, honestly. And then we'll boost its defensive stats up, say 24 and 28. So now we've got this weird EV spread for our Excadrill instead of what it suggested, because we know we don't need that much speed and we really just want it to hit harder. 405 attack with a sword stance that goes up to 810. That's going to hit things extremely hard. We know that for our next Pokemon, you'll see I just click that plus there and it pulls up the next thing. We're going to go ahead and put Gigalith on this squad so that we can make sure that we get Sandstream for our Excadrill. And this is how you build a team, basically. You go through, you select the Pokemon that you want, you put them on there and fill them out, and once you've got everything set, you have your team. You'll see here that when you do your Mega Pokemon, you can do the base form or the Mega form. I normally did the base form in our last one because we weren't set to Mega Evolve, honestly, because you have to Mega Evolve on the first turn that you're in. You probably just want to click your Mega one, though doing so kind of makes it harder because it'll automatically fill in your Mega ability. You can't necessarily pick between the two, so this would get Natural Cure, but given the Cloud9 would only clear weather for the turn that it comes into play, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. And then yeah, once we've got 6 Pokemon in here, you'll see that once I click the 6th one, I don't get any more pluses to add in there. Who else do we put on this squad? Rhythm Heat. I don't get any more pluses because 6 is your default limit. That is what we're doing. We're doing 6v6 singles. If you decide like, hey, I've got this, but I don't really want to bring Como this week, you'll see we have the delete button here. You can just get rid of it. Also worth noting, we'll put Como back in the squad for an example here. Say I don't really know what I want to do with Rotom. I'm like, hey, I drafted this thing, I know it's powerful, but I don't know kind of what to do. Pokemon Showdown will actually have a link here to the Smogon analysis for that Pokemon. we click it, and we've seen these pages before. But like I said, this will tell you what it does. And say you're like, well, I don't really think that I need to come up with a set here. I don't have the time. I just want to get this set and put it into Showdown. I'll just run it right like this. And this has a couple of options for moves that maybe we'll choose between. But say we want this. There's this export button here that when you click it, it's going to turn this into text. And you'll see that it defaulted to the first options that were listed on all of these. We're going to go ahead and copy that, go over to Showdown, and over here there's the import export button. When we click it, it'll pull up what we've currently typed in for this Pokemon on Showdown, which right now is just that it's Rotom Heat and it has Levitate. But when we paste this in and hit save, it'll automatically fill in all of those things. So now we have exactly the set that was on Showdown, with all of those moves, that stats, the nature, the item. It's all set for us. So this is a way to kind of start with something and say we're like, oh, well, we like this, but maybe we don't want to be that bulky. Maybe we want this to hit a little harder. We'll take out some HP and put in some special attack. You can alter it from there perfectly fine. And then if you wanted to maybe save that somewhere, you click import export and you can copy it from here. You can also, if we click back on the team, it'll show you kind of a summary of your team and what you have on it and all of that. You can click import export up here on the team name, which we can change to say, test team. You can click this here and it will give you the full text thing for your team, which is how I took all of my teams that were on my phone and brought them into here. It's also good, if you're moving between stuff or you want to clear out your cookies or whatever, just take all your teams, copy and paste them down, and you can actually do that from the team builder. Down at the bottom there's a backup restore all teams, which will give you all of your teams. So that's kind of a breakdown of how you make a team in Showdown. Now this team isn't filled in. In fact, if I click validate, it's going to say, hey, you don't have any moves here, and you don't have any EVs. Do you want to fix that? So it'll let you know if you've forgotten to do something entirely, which is nice. But I do recommend just looking over your teams before you accept your battle. Make sure that it's good to go. We're going to go ahead and back on this, and we're going to look at a couple of the teams that we did. So let's start. I guess let's go up here and let's look at our team versus Patrick. I forgot a Rockwinnett, man. Rockwinnett is so good. So this team I thought was really kind of neat. One sec here. I thought that this was a really interesting team because, well, we did some silly shit, if I'm being honest. So we have Excadrill to start off with. Like I said, we brought him every single week. So we brought Excadrill, and for this week, we ran him Sand Rush, but you might notice that on this team, we do not have Gigalith, because we let Excadrill set his own Sandstorm. It took a turn to do it, but when you look at Team Preview and you don't see Gigalith, you don't expect Sand Rush Excadrill, because I didn't have a way to set Stand. But we thought that this was the best team to bring for that. Again, we gave him Earthquake, Iron Head, and we gave him X-Scissor as coverage to fight some of Pat's Pokemon. We brought our Whimsicott, running that Choice Scarf with pretty much max speed investment, hasty nature, because we knew that we needed to be extremely fast to outspeed some of Pat's Scarfed Pokemon. And in this case, we didn't run Prankster because we didn't want to run any status moves on Whimsicott. Our primary goal with it was to bring it in, hit something, and maybe U-turn out, or at least get some damage off. And we gave it Infiltrator, which lets it get past Reflect, Light Screen, Aurora Veil, things that protect the other side. We brought our Greninja running Choice Scarf because, again, while it is very fast, we needed it to just go faster. And of course, we gave it Torrent because we have to. We gave it Dark Pulse, Ice Beam, Hydro Pump, and U-Turn to come in and switch out if we decided that wasn't what we wanted to do. We brought our Rhydon, holding that Eviolite, gave it Lightning Rod just because its other abilities didn't really appeal to us, and why not boost our special attack, you know. We gave it Stealth Rock, which was one of its primary reasons for being here. Stone Edge, we gave it Superpower for some fighting coverage. We were fighting a Mega Aggron and wanted some coverage for it if Rhydon happened to be out. And we gave it Mega Horn as well. I forget what it was. Oh, Pat had Victini, and we wanted to be able to hit it with Bug-type moves, because it's Psychic. We have Rotom Heat here running the Aya Papa Berry, which once it hits a quarter of its HP, it restores half of its maximum HP, bringing it back up to 75%. We gave it Volt Switch, Overheat, Will-O-Wisp, and Defog. It's a pretty standard set for us. We gave it max HP and special attack, just a little bit of special defense. And we brought a Rockwanid with its Sticky Web. Sticky Web, let me talk about it. Sticky Web is a hazard that you put on your opponent's side of the field. It will make any grounded Pokemon that switch in have their speed lowered by 1 the stage. Speed is really important in draft because you know exactly the Pokemon that your opponent has access to. What's called speed creeping is really valuable, where you get just enough speed to outspeed your opponent and get to take those other stats and put them into your attacking stats, your bulky stats, so that you live hits better. Sticky Webs, making your opponent's Pokemon not as fast as they expected and allowing your Pokemon to outspeed ones that your opponent didn't expect them to, is super important. We also gave Rockwanid Liquidation with that Splash Pit to boost its damage. Leech Life, just for the other coverage. Again, Bug-type, really nice. Let it get a little bit of health back. We give it Infestation to trap opponents, which we thought was a little bit of neat tech that I don't think we ever got to use there. So that was our squad for Pat. Just real quick rundown. We brought these things to work together. We didn't actually even bring our Mega Pokemon just because Mega Aggron was such a good answer to it. We didn't really think that it was going to be that useful for us. But we did bring Excadrill to hopefully surprise him with that Sandstorm and be able to clear out things. Ultimately, we did lose to Pat, but I like the squad, and I thought that it was an interesting example. Who else did we have a cool team versus? Let's talk about the squad versus Disco, because we did some really silly shit here too. Disco was totally clearing our league. He had a Mega Slowbro that he was very good at using and had a couple other Pokemon to support it. Did a really good job at that. We brought a squad to defeat him with some spicy tech that I really enjoyed. Again, we brought Excadrill because we brought it literally every week. Earthquake, Iron Head, Swords Dance, and this time Brutal Swing, which you'll see is in the usually useless moves section for Excadrill because it's 60 power, it's a dark type move, but Excadrill isn't dark type, it's not really great. But Mega Slowbro is weak to dark, and we have Darkinium Z, so we thought that this was the best use of it to get an unexpected hard hit on it. Hopefully get a Swords Dance in, then hit that Dark Z Brutal Swing to deal a ton of damage. We brought our Mega Altaria in a mixed set this time. You'll see that we've reduced our defense stat rather than our special attack. Because Slowbro has incredibly high defense, I believe, we wanted to have options on both sides. So we were running Hyper Voice and Return that are both affected by Pixelate to make them Fairy type to hit hard on both sides. We ran Earthquake for coverage, and our plan was to hopefully Dragon Dance to raise that attack and lean in to Return and Earthquake to clear out Disco's squad. Our Como, we brought Choice Scarf so that it could hit real fast. We brought it Bulletproof because there wasn't really any sound that we were worried about. We gave it Iron Head, Brick Break, Earthquake, and Clanging Scales. Clanging Scales on the special side, Iron Head, Brick Break, and Earthquake to hit various different things on the physical side, which is where we put all of its stats. We did reduce our special attack with its adamant nature, but Clanging Scales is still just really good. We brought Spoops, our Dusknoir. This is the first Dusknoir I've gotten to talk about, so ability-wise, it gets Frisk. It lets you know what item your opponent has, which is valuable. Pressure isn't super valuable unless you expect a very, very, very stally game, in which case, yeah, it could actually be really useful. But we weren't going for that. Our team leaned kind of offensive, so we wanted to use Frisk so that we would know what different Pokemon we're holding. We gave it Nightshade, which deals damage based on its level, so it'll deal 100 damage regardless, which is really good for the very defensive Mega Slowbro because we get to ignore its defense. We gave it Will-O-Wisp and Toxic, 2 different status options depending on what we were facing and what we wanted to do. And our Spicy Tech, we gave it Destiny Bond. We figured that if we brought Dusknoir out against Slowbro, we could hit it a couple times with Nightshade, maybe get a Toxic off on it, and if we were lucky, because Mega Slowbro is really slow, we could outspeed it and click Destiny Bond and have it accidentally kill itself. Which we did, and it was very fun. We brought Choice Specs Greninja this time, again running Torrent like we had to. Running Hydro Pump, Ice Beam, Dark Pulse, and U-Turn. We liked running U-Turn when we had choice items just because it gives you a way to switch in, and if that goes poorly for you, you switch into something that and then they switch out at the same turn. You get to U-Turn, you get to deal some damage, you get to defensively pivot, essentially. And with 367 speed, Greninja outsped pretty much everything on his team. And we brought Araquanid again with that Sticky Web, that Liquidation. We also gave it Toxic in order to have another option to get Toxic on Slowbro since Araquanid really resisted it pretty well. And we gave it Mirror Coat, which is a move that when you click it, if you are hit by a special attack, you deal double the damage back to that Pokemon. To facilitate that, we gave it 252 HP, and we gave it max attack so that it would hit hard with Liquidation on whatever it was facing. I'm not going to go through every team because that's not relevant necessarily to our format, but I hope that that gives you some idea as to some team building stuff. When it comes time to battle your opponent, what you're going to do is either let your opponent know your showdown name and wait for them, or you're going to click down here where it says Find a User. You're going to type in their username. I'm going to use the Dubious Notion, my assistant coach, and one of your draft admins. He is going to be offline because he's not around right now. But when you click Challenge, this box will pop up, and you get to challenge that. It'll default to Random Battle, which is not what we're doing. We're going to click Anything Goes. It will automatically pull in our test team. If we click OU like we were doing there, it'll show all of our teams, and you can click through them. And then you're going to hit Challenge. When they hit Accept, it will pull you into a battle. I'm going to click, I'm going to click OU here. We're just going to use one of our mini draft teams. It's going to go terrible. But I'm going to show you what the battle interface is like. So when we find a battle, which shouldn't take too long on the OU ladder, this is the battle screen. You're going to see your opponent's team facing against you here. You're going to see your team over here. There's a timer that you can set. Please don't do that for our draft battles. We're not trying to get people to win by timeout. Just play at a reasonable pace, please. So we know their 6 Pokemon, they know our 6 Pokemon. We're going to lead with Ribombee in this case, a Bug Fairy type. We have a Focus Sash on it, and it's going to click Sticky Web to set up that hazard. I imagine that's what they're expecting as well. When you click on your Pokemon to start, it'll bring it out. They brought out Tapu Bulu. We're going to go ahead and click that Sticky Web and set that up. So I suppose I should have mentioned here. You have your 4 moves down at the bottom of the screen here. When you hover over them, it will tell you what they do. You also have your Pokemon down here, and if we were to click one of them, it would switch out. We're going to go ahead and click Quiver Dance and see if we're just going to get some mileage out of this Ribombee for no reason. So you see, you clicked Rock Slide, he missed. And this is just how the battle proceeds. So we know we have Focus Sash on. which means when we get hit, we will not be knocked out. I'm going to click another Quiver Dance to set up again. I imagine. Okay, now we get hit with Rock Slide. We have a Sash though. So now we are facing down a Tapu Bulu. It is Grass and Fairy. If we were to really quickly pull up Tapu Bulu here and hover over it, we'll see that it is weak to Fire, Flying, Ice, Steel, and very weak to Poison. We don't have any of that, so we're just going to click our best move here and click Moonblast. And hopefully, it didn't deal enough. He used Horn Leech and we died. But that's alright. I don't expect to win this battle. So, our Pokemon died, we now have to send one out. We're going to go ahead and send out our Excadrill. You'll see it's running that Choice Scarf. I suspect he's going to swap in one of his flying types to counter it. We're going to click Iron Head in response, so that we'll get some damage off on whatever happens to come in. He could bring in Clefable, though that wouldn't be super recommended because it's also Fairy type. He's going to bring in Hitmonlee. It's going to get affected by the webs there. And you'll see that we have hit it with Iron Head, and then it's out. He probably brought it in to Rapid Spin those webs away, but he can't now because we killed the Hitmonlee. There's still a bunch of defog that could be on this team. Pretty much most flying types get it, and a couple other random things do too. Sends out Snorlax. Snorlax is already slow, it doesn't really care about that. It's very physically defensive. We're going to go ahead and just keep clicking stuff here to try to see how that goes. Yeah, so that didn't go great, obviously. Let's go ahead and switch into... I don't really like most of our options, if I'm being honest, because it's going to hurt a lot. Yeah, we'll just hit it again with Iron Head, let Excadrill die. I'm not worried about it. Let's bring out Gardevoir here. We now have Thick Fat for what that's worth because we have Trace, copies the opponent's ability when we come in. And we're going to go ahead and click Will-O-Wisp and try to burn this thing, which we did. It'll reduce its attack. Now, Heavy Slam's an Iron move, or Steel move, so not really great for us, but what are you going to do? Let's go ahead and click Psyshock. It's going to be fine against anything that switches in, and it might take care of the Snorlax. Yep. And yeah, this is how battles proceed. We are looking at what our opponent does, what they have available, what we have available, and choosing what we think is the best option at the time. I didn't really expect this to go too long, but you know, we don't know how quickly things are going to go. So this is a Zapdos. It's probably going to murder us, but we're going to go ahead and click Psyshock again anyway to get some damage off on it. Yep, so we died. It's holding Life Orb. You'll see that it lost that 10% there. With that Bug-type move, we're going to just bring out Tapu Fini here. With her Misty Surge, it'll reduce Dragon-type moves and make it so you can't status things. We're going to go ahead and click Ice Beam and try to kill this Zapdos. It's going to click Volt Switch, very good against us. Like I said, I'm not super worried about how this is all going to go. We're going to Ice Beam a Clefable, whatever. Let's go ahead and taunt that Clefable, see if it's going to try to like set hazards or whatever. And he attacked us, so, you know, whatever. Let's bring out Venusaur and make this take forever. We're going to just Sludge Bomb the Clefable. It's probably Magic Guard, so it's got Fire Blast for us, but we're Thick Fat because we Mega Evolved. Nothing really loves a Sludge Bomb from this, so we're just going to keep cooking it. if you hover over a Pokemon, you'll see it'll tell you what its speed can be from minimum to maximum, the moves that you've seen from it, its types, its possible abilities if you're not sure. We know that this has Life Orb from that recoil, so go ahead, it tells us that already. Yeah, let's just keep on keeping on here. Sludge Bomb forever. So Gyarados in with the Intimidate. This could be a Mega Gyarados, in which case it'll become Water and Dark. Its flying is honestly kind of a problem for us, but let's go ahead and hit it with the Toxic, because it's going to try to set up with Dragon Dance. So we hit it with the Toxic. It's going to deal increasingly more damage each turn. Let's hit it with a Leech Seed and hope that we can live long enough to kind of just toxic it out. We're going to click Synthesis here because it's going to Mega and try to murder the fuck out of us. And it does, so, oh well. Let's bring out Forges, it's all we got left. We've got Wish to heal ourselves, Moonblast, and Toxic. Dark type is going to be great against us, and Moonblast is going to hurt it a lot, but it's already 2 times attack, and we lost. So, that's how it goes. Like I said, not really concerned about it. You can also chat with your opponent, which we didn't really do here, just the, traditional GG at the end. But yeah, that's how battles work. At the end of your battle, you're going to want to click this Upload and Share Replay button, and it'll give you a link. We need this link in order to maintain our documents and our statistics and your win-loss ratio and your kills and deaths and all that. We need this link. And I would rather get this link from both participants in a battle than from neither. So, when you do a draft match, make sure at the end that you click that Upload and Share button, you copy that link, and you post it in the Draft Match Replay channel, because we need it. So, that is how Showdown works. If you have questions throughout the season, certainly ask them. I'll be glad to answer. We had a couple questions come up earlier in the day that I want to talk about a little bit. We had some questions, what are good abilities? Well, we talked about a bunch, but there's still some to talk about, just to kind of go through like why some things are good. I'm just going to clear this out so that nothing's marked off. Our formatting automatically updates and takes care of some things. There it is. Oh, I actually completely erased my Galataria, huh? It's fine. I made a copy of this document for this exact stream, so messing it up doesn't matter. So for abilities, what's a good ability? Your Ultra Beasts, which you'll see like Blacephalon and Celsteela, get an ability called Beast Boost. Whenever they KO an opposing Pokemon, whenever a Pokemon dies when they're on the field, it will boost whatever stat is their highest by 1 stage. Clefable gets access to Magic Guard, which makes it not take damage from indirect sources like entry hazards or status. Excadrill we talked about with Mold Breaker and Sand Rush. There's abilities like that for each type of weather, which would be rain, hail, harsh sunlight, and sand are your 4 types of weather there. I think that's it. I hope that's it. And there are things that set like sand on coming in, like Mega Tyranitar, I believe, does, and Gigalith and Hippowdon. Your Tapu set terrain when they come in, which has different effects. Electric terrain makes it so you can't fall asleep, and it boosts the power of electric moves. Grassy terrain makes it so that grounded Pokemon recover some life at the end of each turn, and it reduces the power of ground moves. Stuff like that. There are things like Volcanion, which gets Water Absorb, I want to say. Volcanion, yes, it gets Water Absorb, which means when it gets hit by a water attack, it actually restores its HP instead of damages it. You have things like Magnezone that can, I think Magnezone can have Levitate, or like Bronzong, which can have Levitate or Heat Proof, which make it immune to certain types of damage. Something like Chandelure can have Flash Fire, which is like Water Absorb, except instead of healing you, it boosts your special attack. You can have, Gothitelle is an A tier in this draft because it has Shadow Tag, which traps the opposing Pokemon in play. Outside of if it uses a switching move like U-turn, or if it's a ghost type, but you can trap something in play and then wear it down without its ability to switch out, which is really important. Landorus Therian and Incineroar and a couple of other things get an ability called Intimidate, which lowers attack whenever they switch in. There's all sorts of abilities, and it really is part of what makes each Pokemon unique, so I really recommend that you look at a bunch of them and try to figure out what works for you. If you look at a Pokemon and you go, why is that good? Maybe start by looking at its abilities, because for a lot of things, that's why it's there. The base stats are important, its types and the moves that it gets are important, but the abilities end up doing a lot. Let me let my dog in. I apologize. Okay. So we talked about abilities, we talked about synergies, we talked about the way that the points work, which, again, if you're not sure as the draft is going on, reach out to the draft admins, make sure that you have a roster that will work out. Just try to do some planning beforehand, try to look at what you have available. I know it can be a lot to keep track of, but we have a slow draft, you have time. Just make sure you ask if you're not sure. We got the question of what is a good team composition, which is a hard question because it kind of depends on what you want to do. If you build those cores that we talk about, Fire, Water, and Grass, Fairy, Dragon, and Steel, among your Pokemon, that will help. If you make sure that you have physical attackers and special attackers, that will help. If you make sure that you have something that's physically bulky and specially bulky, that'll help. Make sure you have a way to deal with hazards. Make sure you have a way to set hazards. Make sure that there isn't a type that you just completely are weak to across your whole board. If I'm not paying attention, I have a tendency to go like all in on a bunch of fairy types, and then if you look at me with anything poison, I die. Not ideal. I didn't actually end up drafting Rockwanid in our roster, and I feel so bad about it, because Rockwanid was really good for us. And in fact, between a Rockwanid, Mega Altaria, and Excadrill, geez, I can't click on the right ones. They actually covered every type. We resisted every type with one of those three Pokemon. So making your team have a variety of resistances to be able to handle different Pokemon is useful. Looking at your speed and making sure that you're not a bunch of slow Pokemon, that you're not all 40 speed and you get outsped by everything. That's important and useful. And I should have done more of it when I drafted. Just making sure that you have an idea of what your team wants to do and how it's going to do it. There isn't any one way to say, this is how you make a good team, because it really depends. The way that I like to build a team is I like to start with one Pokemon and go, I want to build that. I like this Pokemon. I like what it can do. I like this ability or something, and I want to build around it. And then go, okay, what would go with this? Well, it's Fire type, so maybe I want a Grass type to absorb those waters. And well, since I have a Water and Fire type, let's get a Grass type to balance that out. Let's hit that core. So making sure that, you've got those things covered, but starting around your 1 and just trying to figure out what goes best with it. Like I said, there isn't a great answer, but making sure that you have a variety of situations covered is the goal for draft. And then I wanted to specifically talk about just one other thing. We did mention that if you draft a Mega Pokemon, it locks out the base form of that Pokemon. And if you draft a base form Pokemon, it will lock out the Mega for that Pokemon. Let's talk about this one here, because this one is different than everyone else. Well, it is and it isn't, because Mega Charizard has 2 forms. There's Mega Charizard X, which is a Fire and Dragon type, and there is Mega Charizard Y, Fire and Dragon, and then there's Mega Charizard Y, which is a Fire and Flying type, like Charizard is. You also see that their stats are different. Mega X has equal attack and special attack, and then 85 special defense, 111 defense, 78 HP. Those stay the same. This one is way in on the special attack, and they have different abilities as well, and different abilities than the base Charizard form. If you are drafting a Mega Charizard, you do have to pick which one you draft. If you draft Mega Charizard Y, you do not get Mega Charizard X. Similarly, if you draft Mega Charizard Y, or Mega Charizard X, you don't get Mega Charizard Y. And for neither of them do you get access to base Charizard with whatever moves you want. However, if somebody drafts Mega Charizard X, Mega Charizard Y goes off the table. If somebody drafts Y, X goes off the table. And if somebody drafts either of them, base form Charizard goes off the table. So they are 3 Pokemon that drafting any one will lock the others out, but you only get access to whichever one you specifically draft, and you do have to draft either X or Y as your Mega if that is what you want to have access to. And that covers all of the questions that I had written down. There is one other thing. We did have a question. How does the draft work? Which we've set up servers here. That's distracting. Let's look at the Sun server. We set up servers here for each conference. There's the Sun conference and the Moon conference. You are in one or the other. And you only actually have gotten an invite to whichever one you're in, so whichever one of the servers looks like this, that's the server you'll be drafting in. We have a bot set up for the draft, where if we say we want to go and look at our boy Excadrill, you can use the bot calls channel to look at Pokemon to see what tier they're in. During the draft, you can use this channel to see if they're drafted or not without having to pull up the doc. And you can also look at teams. That'll give you the full list of teams and the draft order. So that's really useful. Again, our draft order goes 1 to 16 and then back from 16 to 1. Your draft picks will be done in the draft picks channel, which right now nothing is going on in because the draft isn't started yet. But we will be doing the draft at the time that it goes on. It's going to be starting September 1st around midnight if I'm still awake, which I'm probably going to be. But it'll start September 1st. That's Eastern time because I am in Eastern time and I make all of the documents. Also, our hosts are in Eastern time and a large number of our competitors are in Eastern time. It's just how we're going to do it. I'm sorry if you're in another time zone, you will have to translate. If you tell me your time zone, I will keep track of it and I will be able to translate for you should the need arise. But when I say, hey, the draft is going to start at midnight on September 1st, Eastern time, it's in my time zone. So that's just how that is. I will try to make sure that I also tell you, like, hey, the trade deadline for the week is 11:59 p.m. on Saturday of that week. Eastern Time. I'll probably make a mention, especially during the first couple of weeks, like, hey, you have 18 hours to make your trades. You have 12 hours to make your trades. And just make it clear that, like, hey, this is how much time is left for you to do that. But all of our stuff is going to be in Eastern Time by default because that's the time that I'm working in, and I make all of the documents. You're stuck with it. Once we have completed our drafts and this whole, like, we've gotten through all of the drafts on both sides and we're all got our rosters and all of that, these servers are going to go away because we don't need them outside of it, and there's a lot of interplay between servers during the season. We'll be back in our Blastburn radio using primarily our draft chat, our scheduling, the draft match replays channel, where all of your replays go. When you finish a match, post your replay. And, the link to the documents is in here as well. I'm going to update this because we actually have a new hub that our draft admin, Ozzy, came up with. It's fantastic. But there's also worth noting we have a schedule document there. This is a copy that I made. But it will show you all of the teams in each of their divisions. We have our Sun Conference, Johto, Unova, Sinnoh, and Kalos, and similarly, Moon Conference, Johto, Unova, Sinnoh, and Kalos. You'll be, primarily competing with the people within your division. You'll face them each twice, and whoever is the top in each division will move forward to the playoffs. So, when I look at my team, the Windy City Whimsicott, I know that I need to be better throughout the season than Rohain Cindy Riders, the London Landos, and the Palm Bay Piplup. That's Rohain, Ozzy, and Penguin Mage. We should have... Yep, over here you'll see the Sun Conference and Moon Conference and the list of who the coaches are for each of those, though it is worth noting that if you're in Discord, and this is going to be really weird on that, so you can actually at the team, and it will notify the team. So if you're not sure who the coach is, but you know the team you have to face, you can add them in the scheduling channel and be like, hey, when you want to fight. We do highly recommend, like, at the beginning of the week, try to schedule your match, because it really sucks to get to the end of the week and go, hey, where are all the matches? We need the matches. Please do the matches. We want you to complete one match a week. It's not that difficult to do. We understand everyone is busy. We're all busy. One match a week is a reasonable pace, we think, to get things done. If you expect that, like, say week 4 comes along and you're like, oh man, I know that I'm going to be, like, totally unavailable for most of this week. Can you get that match done early? Because if you can do a match a week early, get 2 in that week 3, then we don't need to worry about it in week 4. We don't need to worry about making it up. We understand that things are going to happen. Please make an effort to get your matches in on time. Use this scheduling channel. Please make sure that you are trying to schedule your matches ahead of time so that we know when things are. It's not just, oh, I hope I line up with my opponent, because we do have a lot of different time zones in there. And it would be really nice to get our matches in on time. So yeah, this is kind of where we are here, and this is our draft order if you want to look at it on the document. For the Sun Conference and the Moon Conference, these drafts will be going at the same time, but they do not interact. But you will definitely see that in our schedule, if we look at me, for example, I will be facing in the first round the Pensacola Blue Porygons, then the London Landos. Here we go. Week 3, Venomville Vileplumes is down here in the Johto Conference of the Moon Division, or Johto Division of the Moon Conference. So while our drafts are separate, we do face people in the other conferences. It all comes together. So you also notice everybody has a bye week throughout They should start in week 4 and end by week 12. So just sometime in the middle of the season, you'll have a week off. It's a great week if you think you're not going to be able to make one of these ones shortly after it, to schedule it and get it in if you can. Try to be available. You know, we're all just trying to have fun here and enjoy this competition. It sucks to try to schedule a match and have it not go through, and then we have to like either find a time to do it later, in which case it becomes more difficult to do, or if there's just no way to make it happen, we have to award wins and losses based on matches that didn't happen, and it sucks. Try to do your matches. Like, that's really all I can say about it. We'd like for you all to do your matches. If you need a refresher on anything for the draft, remember that the draft document is here. In each of the servers, you will see that there is... I guess I probably should have pinned it. I didn't pin it. That's fine. Well, there is a sheet for each... Yep, here it is. So there is a sheet for each conference that will show your, once it loads, please. Okay, it will show your draft. So you'll see the tiers here. There's nothing marked off because, well, we haven't done it yet. But this is the Sun Conference draft. You'll see we start off with Cloud9 and the Republic City Fireverts and move onwards all the way down to pick 16, Youngster Timmy and the Death Valley Heatrons. So you'll be able to look at this. You'll be able to look at this as the draft is going on to see what people have drafted in a visual, you know, easy to look at way. You'll be able to look at the tier list, and things will be marked off if people have taken them, as well as tell you which team in the little things here has taken it. All of our rules are here. If you don't remember what's banned, it's over here. You know, we've got a little Pokedex thing here that we stole, I'm pretty sure, from the Puckle folks whenever Snag and Upple asked for it. So it tells you some stuff here. You know, there's a wide variety of information here. And it also, we've got this little summary here that says, like, hey, this is the stuff that, these are the time zones that people are in, and these are the, you know, this is their showdown name, and this is their, this is the coach, and these are the assistant coaches, and this will be more filled in as we get closer and closer to the season, and we get further into it. I don't think anybody has noted an assistant coach other than Jerry and me, but you are allowed to have an assistant coach. There is nothing that your assistant coach has to do. The only thing that they are not allowed to do is participate in your battles. But you are absolutely welcome to work with any number of people, both officially and unofficially, to prep for your match. We can't stop you. But if you feel that you need some help, it is worth reaching out and trying to see if somebody wants to be your assistant coach. While there is interconference play, there are teams that do not face each other. You might find somebody in the other conference that you don't face for the entirety of the regular season and say, hey, do you want to work together to kind of like puzzle some of this stuff out? You're absolutely welcome to. And I know that we've had some collaboration on trying to come up with draft boards. My draft board is set, so if anybody needs some help, either in the Sun or Moon Conference, I am absolutely willing to help. I'm willing to help you clarify any rules that you are not sure of, and I'm gonna hopefully by tomorrow evening or maybe halfway through the day on Thursday have kind of a written primer that says like, hey, these are a bunch of things we've talked about in written form. So if you can't watch these videos, there will be a written version for you, or, you know, if you just can't quite remember all of the things that we've talked about, there will be a written version for you to look through so that you can go, oh yeah, we talked about cores, but what were they again? And you can just go look at it. But I think that's going to do it. I've talked for nearly 2 hours about all of this. So I think that we will sign off here. If you've got any questions, come to the Discord, send me a direct message at me in the BBR server or in your conference server. Let me know if you need any help with anything, and I look forward to drafting with you all. Thank you for participating in this draft league. Thank you for being a part of this. I am Flamin' Air, and I will see you on the battlefield.